Good evening. My name is Kirk. I'm with Chuck Rogers. This is Redwood Wonk. You're either listening or watching to Access Humboldt. We've got a lot to talk about, so we're going to dive right in. But I think the story that has caught most of the news coverage, and maybe not completely warranted, except that there's some very serious issues underneath. We have the storm that hit Texas. Causing freezing, conditions, loss of power. A number of people died in Texas, elsewhere too, but in Texas because of the loss. A lot of discussion about the policy in Texas around the grid. Their power grid, and I'm going to let you start in with what you want to talk about. There's a lot in there to talk about. There's also, of course, Senator Cruz, who just seems to make it worse for himself every day.
Yeah, the Cruz family decided it would be a really good time to go to Cancun, leaving the dog at home, by the way. Snowflake, I believe, was the dog's name. Maybe the dog was glad to see them go to Mexico. I don't know, but what a political blunder. In an emergency like that, you hope that your leaders run toward the emergency instead of running away from the emergency. The speculation is that even in Texas, this is going to be something that is going to cost him a lot politically. And we'll see moving forward. We don't know yet, obviously, but
one thing we want to say about that, Chuck, is the fact that he lied about it. First, he tried to blame his kids. They wanted me to take him down there for spring break, like they needed help getting there or something. And then he intended to come back, but then emails got leaked. Apparently, there was a whole email discussion with his neighbors, and the neighbors some of them don't like him very much. He actually said something about, we've got some Democrats on the block who put up Beto O'Rourke signs a couple of years ago, and I thought that was kind of rude, like they're not supposed to have their own opinion, because he's on the block. He lied, and apparently she's very upset because they were talking about, we're going to Cancun to get away out of this freezing house. So it's been headlines and discussion, and of course, you go on to the right-wing media, and all they keep saying is, this is a distraction from Cuomo, who is in a bit of trouble, and rightfully so. But there's no reason we can't discuss them all. So anyway, I just wanted to put that in there. I think having problems with the truth is not new to Ted Cruz or his constituents who have been listening to him for all this time. And, also originally, I think some of this has been tamped down a little bit, but originally the reaction of the governor, Greg Abbott, was to try to somehow blame this on renewable energy. It is true that it looks like they forgot to winterize their wind turbines. Which, in Texas for years and years, people have said, that's the obvious place for giant wind farms for sure, especially the western part of the state. That really didn't fly. I mean, people in Texas see what happened. And I think it's going to impact Greg Abbott, and it's also going to impact Ted Cruz. And I think it'll probably also have some impact on John Cornyn, the other senator, as well. Interestingly enough, there's a little strip on the eastern side of Texas, right next to Louisiana, and another couple of places out in West Texas around El Paso, and then way up in the northern panhandle that are not on the Texas-only grid. And of course, they've fared fairly well, and a lot of those people have been trying to help. You mentioned Beto O'Rourke, and that's, he's out in El Paso, not affected personally by this, but he's been trying to help. As has
AOC, who raised what, $5 million.
$5 million.
Yeah, for the people of Texas. So, I don't know how this is going to play out. I know that some of the board members of the organization that oversees the Texas grid have resigned, as they probably should have. I think we can also, and I can ask you about this. I think we can also anticipate multiple lawsuits about this, and maybe a complete restructuring of the Texas policy on energy. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I did read up on the history of this on it, and apparently about 10 years ago, it wasn't quite as intense, but there was another ice storm. Right. And the issue of upgrading the grid in general has been up several times since then. And let's remember the fact that, yes, the turbines for some, not all, but some of the windmills froze up, but equipment for the nuclear power plant that they have down there also froze up, and other power plants also froze up. So there's been talk about upgrading to, not just for this, but for other potential emergencies, upgrading the grid. And in 2011, they tried to pass one, but the oil industry came in and blocked it, and they got their people to block it. Oil in Texas is huge. Obviously, it's probably one of the biggest industrial lobbies there, because there had been a move to switch to sustainable energy, and by upgrading, they were going to not only lock in the existing sustainable energy, but actually set it up so that it could increase. And for that reason, 3 times since 2011, the attempts to upgrade the grid through the Texas legislature have been blocked. And so this is why they attacked wind, because they know that after this, there's no choice politically. They're going to have to buck the oil industry. So that's why Abbott and others came right out the gate attacking wind power, because they wanted. There were false memes being put out by elected officials, including a helicopter that they said was using oil, a petrol powered helicopter using petrol to warm up some of the turbines. Turned out it was actually shot in Sweden from a stock photo of a Swedish helicopter dropping hot water onto their windmills a long time ago. But these windmills can survive, can work in very cold. They have windmill power in Antarctica. So it can be done. It's not, it just needed to be done, and it wasn't done because there was no political will to buck the oil industry in this. It is a classic situation where, there needs to be major reform. And now, this is about the right time, because Texas is starting to change, as we've discussed all this time. Beto O'Rourke will probably be running for governor in 2 years, so there's not another Senate run up until Cruz comes up again in 2004. But we'll see where this goes. But this was in large part, not only that, there's a lot of negligence in the rest too, but at least in part due to the intransigence of the legislature around 2026, around the legislature, because of the pressure of the oil industry.
Well, I think it also, writ large, this is a lesson for everyone. I think not just in Texas, but everyone, about the importance of prioritizing infrastructure, right? If Texas had a priority on this instead of profits for the folks running the energy system there, then they would have been doing this all along and paying attention to it all along. And as you say, there was 10 years ago in 2011, there were calls for doing work on this and making sure that that everything was okay after some close calls then. But they didn't do it because that would cost money and that would take money out of the profit line. So I think it's a good lesson for all of us
about why we should be prioritizing infrastructure, as the architects and engineers have been telling us for decades and decades at this point.
I agree, and anyway, we have this now. Cruz isn't directly responsible for all that, but what came across through his actions was what was the his tone deafness. Yes, and he should be there. You don't have to be a governor or a mayor or even a state, legislature to be involved in this. He's a leader. He should be there, right? And not be seen, in an airport getting out of there after his wife complained about the freezing house. Anyway, I mean, this is something that will be dealt with in Texas. The other thing is that the grid, because Texas didn't want to be caught up in federal regulations, is separate. So other power could not be sent in from other states to mitigate the situation. This is a big deal in Texas. This might be a rallying cry for Democrats, at this point. But they've got to. That means that the power of the oil industry has to be challenged, and maybe the tech industry is starting to get into a position. I mean, it's always old money versus new money, all of that. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But Beto has definitely upped himself in the public eye right now. Yeah,
well, it certainly gives people like Beto and all other Democrats and independents in the state of Texas an issue to stand on. That literally. Well, not everybody in Texas, but most people in Texas were impacted by and will remember. So, yeah, I think this hands the Democrats a big issue in the forthcoming elections, whether they're statewide or local. I mean, this will be an issue that voters there will want to know where politicians stand and what's going to be done about it and how to prevent this from happening again. And they're going to have a good answer for that. And having to have a good answer is going to put the Republicans in Texas between a rock and a hard place on this issue. So it will be a big issue, and it will be made a big issue by Democrats and independents in Texas. You can just bank on that.
And this could tie into Biden. Biden is actually looking pretty aggressive in wanting to, push sustainable energy across the board. And this might be where he gets involved. He's going to Texas on Friday, going to be in Houston. And, this might be an opportunity. Now, he's got to do it in a different way that makes him look like he's not trying to interfere with Texas politics. But if it's done right, it could really make a big difference in terms of pushing his policy, which has been more aggressive than Obama or Clinton, quite frankly, in terms of this.
And this is one of those issues that is not just esoteric policy talk. This is one of those issues where the administration, the Biden administration, or Democrats in Texas could really make the point that this is why government is important and why government that works well is important, because it can impact lives in a big way. And, this gives them an opportunity to show why good government is necessary in a giant society like ours. And, again, because this is an issue that impacted everybody and will continue to impact everybody every day.
Absolutely. And Cruz, of course, had some problems politically even before all this. I mean, he was part of the overturning the election crowd, and even after the insurrection happened on the 6th, pushing it to the hilt. And at any rate, it's what we should take a look at is the Civil War in the Republican Party right now.
Yes.
There is a lot going on in terms of that. We've already saw the attempt to remove Liz Cheney. McCarthy actually kind of went to bat for her in some type of compromise, but as we've discussed, McCarthy is weak. He is a weak leader at this point. He was reported to have been in a yelling match with Trump over, like, get some help to us. We're being invaded here, and Trump just kind of making light of it. And even for a day after that, he was critical of Trump, but he's right back in the Trump camp, has actually gone down to Mar-a-Lago to talk with Trump, and seems to be whipping the Republicans into, what was it, 140 Republicans in the House voted to not certify the election. That's a lot, running on a lie. And the Republicans do not want to accept the narrative that pushing that lie was in part responsible, made that insurrection much more likely. And of course, we've had hearings about it, and McCarthy and Liz Cheney today were in a joint conference, and McCarthy was asked, should CPAC, the Conservative Political Action, I forget, is it committee? Conference. It's a thing that right-wingers do every year. It's always, it's moved to the right over the years. It used to be, a little bit more moderate politically wise, but now it is absolutely in Trump territory. And McCarthy was asked if Trump should be invited to the conference, which is happening this weekend, and of course he said, "Oh, absolutely." And Cheney, when she was asked the same question, said, "Well, CPAC, can do what it wants. It's their conference, but as I've said, Trump is not the leader of the party and should not be." And then there was an awkward silence that was only broken by a reporter coughing. I mean, it's that. You also have, and we'll talk, we should probably move into a discussion about the hearing the other day, in which the three officers, the two sergeant-at-arms and the now resigned chief of police of the Capitol, Sund, having been replaced by someone else who also testified, but the three of them coming for the first time. I mean, because they never even, before they were forced into resigning, they never even held a press conference, no briefings. They should have been holding daily briefings. We're investigating, we're making arrests, we're, or we're working with the FBI and making arrests. These are the conditions that, some of our officers were injured, a couple, somebody died today. I mean, they should have been there every day. And this is the first time that they're coming. Sund, the officer who was the police chief, not the sergeant at arms, saying, I regret having resigned. No, he was complicit in this. And they were actually starting to blame each other a little bit, saying, I've got phone records, blah, 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 about who was talking to whom. They're all pointing the fingers at the FBI and the Pentagon, which is fine, because the FBI and the Pentagon apparently sent them an email, a warning of the danger that apparently didn't make it to any of the three of them somehow. So, blame the FBI for being nonchalant about it. Should have been a phone call. Are you ready for this? On the other hand, when they didn't hear anything from the FBI, they should have been on the phone with the FBI. Okay, what can you tell me? I mean, they blame it on lower staff for having sent it in the wrong direction. I mean, this was just an abject failure, and they're all there righteously talking about, how this was the federal government's fault, and there's nothing we could have done. I'm glad they at least, established a narrative that this was a planned, coordinated attack. I talked about the weapons in there, but Ron Johnson, Senator Ron Johnson, who, was famously saying it wasn't that bad of an insurrection, it wasn't armed, and they say, no, they were armed. And they were contradicted there, but a lot going on, some idiotic comments from a few of the senators, but I'll let you comment.
Well, Ron Johnson, I mean, idiotic comments, great segue. Ron Johnson, probably folks saw it. If not, you can find it. It's online. During that hearing about the insurrection, read a multi-page blog post that he had found from somewhere that claimed that the insurrectionists were Just a few of them, not very many, said that a lot of them were just kind of strolling around, and that there was no coordination, and that the ones who did break the windows, they were fake Trump supporters.
Right.
And of course, he has been hammered with backlash about that, not only nationally but specifically in Wisconsin. So that's
and by Portman. By Senator Portman.
And by Portman as well. Yeah, right. And you combine that with what McCarthy said in the press conference that you were talking about, with what Liz Cheney said. In fact, she went a step further and said not only should Trump not be at CPAC, he should not be relevant in politics in this country going forward. And the fact that Trump, though, is going to be the keynote speaker Sunday at CPAC, which is being held in Orlando. They moved it out of D.C. this year in Orlando. And supposedly he is aides of his have leaked to the press that he's going to talk about running in 2024, talk about the fact that he's not finished yet, talk about the fact that he's going to help find primary opponents for people who did not support him. The overarching theme there, I think, is that what we're being shown is that the Republican Party has decided definitively on a direction, and they're sticking with the line that the election was stolen, that Trump won in a landslide, that the Biden administration is illegitimate, that the message there is that there is no room for anti-Trump dissent in the Republican Party at this point in time. Now, we will see what happens with Liz Cheney in Wyoming. That's going to be a good test of this.
Yes.
And we'll see what happens with some of the other folks in some of the swing states that are kind of purple. We'll see how this goes. But for right now, the fact that CPAC invited Donald Trump to come be their keynote speaker after all of this, it tells us the direction they've chosen. I think it's ill-advised. I think anybody who can read statistics and demographics and read the political tea leaves of the future, this is a dumb mistake on their part, but it's their mistake to make.
Yeah, because they're all afraid of being primaried. They're afraid, they are afraid of this guy. This is, an authoritarian movement. This is the first mass-scale authoritarian movement we've had in this country since the Silver Shirts of the 1930s, and this is way beyond them. I mean, McCarthyism wasn't really a movement. That was more the elites pushing stuff. But this is we have tens of millions of people who do not believe in democracy, do not believe that who supported the concept of a military coup, and that is a very dangerous situation.
It is dangerous, and it's all about power. It's that particular cohort of the Republican Party, that far right fringe of the Republican Party, that's trying to hold on to the status quo as far as the power structure in this country goes, and they're afraid of what the future might hold in this country. And they look at an administration like Biden and Harris and the folks who have been chosen as nominees for his cabinet, and it reinforces their fears. And so I think that's why they're not moving away from Trump at this point. We'll see how that goes. I wonder, though, whether some of the biggest funders of politics in this country might get a little weary of this whole lie that's being generated, and whether they may have trouble raising as much money as they have been used to raising in the past going forward. And that might be one of the things that slows this movement.
It may very well be. There were a lot of people who left the party. There are a lot of people who've left the party since January 6th. Right. Not a huge exodus, but a demonstrably significant exodus. And again, there are Republicans in there who are going to put up a principled fight. We'll see what happens to them in 2 years in the House, and whenever they're the seven, what'll happen to them. I mean, Murkowski is up in 2 years. The seven who voted to impeach. But they do have a problem. But we all have a problem too. I'm not going to sit back watching, eating popcorn and enjoying this, because this is a very serious situation. There is an authoritarian grip on a major political party. We've never been in that situation before. Right. We got a problem. The other senator who said idiotic things was Senator Hawley. Now, he's been probably the biggest sycophant for Trump on the 6th and after. He is, of course, famous for having gone out and held his fist up to the crowd before they invaded, but anyways, to the crowd. And a few days after that, well, I'll just say Lieutenant General Honore, who has been tapped to evaluate emergency responses in the past, has been tapped by Pelosi to head the investigation and evaluation on behalf of the House to investigate the response and the problems with it, and the improvements we need to make in the system that came up on Tuesday, and will probably come up with a follow-up when FBI and Pentagon people, who also haven't been holding briefings, will comment next week. But Honore, before he was selected to do this, a few days after, was really dissatisfied with Hawley and basically said he was, I don't have the exact quote, but, a little, piece of S from Yale, who ought to be run out of town and disbarred, and then, had the hashtag, AHAT with naming him and Cruz, and I forget which other one, and the rest. And and Hawley was really upset about this. Yeah. And so when it was his turn to talk at the beginning, he brings this up. Now, it has nothing to do with the hearings yesterday, except that Honore also said it looked almost like the police heads, the three of them, were complicit. They were so ineffective. Not saying that they were part of the demonstration, but that they were complicit. And and so he wanted to get statements from each of the three of them. No, I'm not complicit, blah, blah, blah. But he ranted mostly about how this guy should not be heading up the investigation. Now, this was also a big mistake, because if it wasn't for that, I never would have heard about the tweet, right? And the tweet has since been erased. So all Hawley is doing is bringing attention to the fact that a decorated, recognized lieutenant general called him an a-hole. I mean, that's just an absolute mistake on his part. And Missouri is not as red as some other states. He could, be in trouble when he comes up again. So, again, really poor calculations based on their base. And Ron Johnson, I mean, he seems to think that he's been elected in, Wyoming or something like that, where he's guaranteed to be reelected. Wisconsin is not a red state. It's a bluish purple state.
Right. Yeah. And Johnson really relies on rural Wisconsin for his reelection. Right. So I think that's got to be, that's the only calculation I can think of. He knows he's not going to win Milwaukee. He's not going to win Madison. The two biggest population centers there. So I think he's just speaking to rural Wisconsin. And I can't think of another calculation, because it's just idiotic. It's just idiotic. And General Honore is the guy, for folks who don't know. He was the one who finally came in following the Hurricane Katrina disaster of the Bush administration, and at least got a response organized and got it going. So he's used to emergencies and responses and so on. So he's the guy, and I'm glad he said something about Hawley. He's a direct, opinionated guy. So I'm glad that he did that, and so we'll see what happens there. And I want to also go back to, you mentioned Republicans leaving the party, and you're right. It's not, it's not millions, but in just about every state, and the statistics are out there, in just about every state, there have been thousands of Republicans who have changed their registration since the January 6th insurrection, and even more than that if you go back to the November 3rd election and all of the election denial. So it is in the thousands in almost every state. Now, why is that significant, even though it's not a huge number? I think it's significant because when you look at how close the elections are in the swing states in this country, a few thousand votes can be enough to make a difference. So, depending upon where all of those votes are, thousands can make a big difference. And what that does, it puts the Republicans behind the change, behind the 8 ball heading into the next elections, because they've already lost thousands in some of those states. So they not only have to, make up for that loss, they still have to make sure they get more than whoever their Democratic opponent is going to be. So it's gonna hurt them first, I think, in some of the swing states that, as you say, are purple. That's where it's going to hurt them the most.
Yeah, and Wisconsin's kind of a bluish purple at this point.
Right.
So there's no guarantees there, but the elections have gone well for the Democrats in the past couple cycles.
Yeah.
The other thing that we need to look at is what's going to develop with these investigations. We've got Senate and the House investigating the 6th, the responses, the connections, and all of that, beginning with this with these hearings. And next week, it's going to be the federal responses. That's just going to be leading to a trickle of information. Already, one major, Ron John's narrative was destroyed by it, and it's going to lead to investigations. There's probably going to be investigations about the tours we've talked about that happened in the days before. Which House members, possibly Hawley, did it? It's not going to be a narrative that is going to benefit the Republicans. And quite frankly, my theory as to why the sergeant in arms, both House and Senate, and the police chief did not respond more aggressively was deference to Trump. He did, there was a clue. He denied it yesterday, but he said something about the optics. Didn't like the optics of certain measures being taken. But but I think none of the three of them wanted to be in a position where they were sending a message that they thought Trump's people were dangerous. I mean, I think that is going to be an overriding theme, and I think the Republicans are scared of that because this is going to be over a long period of time. We're past the impeachment trial now, and so now we're going to have more information trickling out as these trials happen, as this investigation pursues, and obviously they don't like Honore being in there because he's going to be very aggressive about it. And then all of a sudden, these people are going to be these representatives, Senate and House, are going to have to be accountable for their impeachment votes in 2 years, and as long as it takes to drag this out. And it's not going to happen right away, but it's going to be a low grade release of information, that will lead to this time a report, that's not overly redacted and not mis-summarized by the head of the DOJ.
Do you think that, given all the information that we are going to learn from these investigations, that the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia could bring criminal charges in the District of Columbia because that's where it happened against some of those folks?
I don't know any reason why it can't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think congressional people can face, they're not the president. They don't have to be impeached and removed from office before they face criminal charges. Yes, it can happen. Will it? I don't know. Will there be the political will for it or the evidence for it? That's the most important question. Right. We don't know at this point, but it's not looking good for Republicans in general with the narrative. I mean, they've already lost their narrative that about Antifa. I mean, there's not. I mean, only one guy who's marginally kind of leftist, but more weird than any ideology, has been arrested and charged. So if you actually believe that Antifa pulled this off, you ought to be expressing your outrage with the FBI. Why haven't you arrested the Antifa people? Why have you only arrested Trump supporters, right? Yeah. I'll be very interested to see how next week's the hearing develops, and I also want to hear how the FBI and the Pentagon respond to the police allegations this week. I don't think it's going to be pretty. We'll see.
Do you think that they're going to subpoena Mike Pence to testify since he was there?
I don't know. That's I don't know that they need to.
It would be very interesting to get his take on that, because of course Secret Service was with him. Obviously, he was the one who was overseeing the certification of the Electoral College votes. So you would think that he would be at the top of the witness list. I don't know. The reason I mention that is because I think it's going to be interesting to watch Mike Pence in the near term to see exactly what happens. Certainly, he still has political ambitions, so he would be somebody looking at 2024 for sure. On the other hand, he leaked a statement or at least an opinion, an answer to an off-the-cuff question that he had received somewhere, where he said that he and Trump were getting along fine these days. It wasn't like they were spending a lot of time together, but he released some information that indicated that he was not angry at Trump, who, of course, when asked by McCarthy to send in the troops, said, well, I don't know what's going on over there. I don't think we're going to do that. So we'll see how Mike Pence navigates this. Certainly with Trump speaking at CPAC, and if Trump makes mention of him being a candidate in 2024, that is going to have the effect of freezing the rest of the Republican field as far as ambitions for 2024 go. That you would think would include Mike Pence and Hawley and Cruz and Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio and Liz Cheney. I mean, who knows? Nikki Haley, all of those people. So it'll be interesting to see how Mike Pence plays this.
Well, Nikki Haley has already separated herself from Trump, so she might run anyway. She might. And probably she is the most dangerous if she can win the nomination. She is probably the most dangerous to whoever the Democrats are, whether it's Biden or
absolutely,
of course we've talked about this before. It'd be a really interesting run between her and Kamala Harris.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
That would just be anyway. And they're both smart. And both really, will be steeped in policy at that time, and it'll just be anyway. It'll be a very interesting time if that happens. But
I'm sorry. Well, I was just going to say, just following up on that could lead to a Republican primary that is grievance versus policy, and what happens there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know what I also do know. We talked about an exodus from the Republican Party. There are also Trumpers and QAnon people who are like actually starting to snap out of it, saying, "Yeah, what have I been saying? What have I been doing here?" Right. And it's becoming a theme on YouTube and everywhere else of people talking about how they got sucked into these conspiracy theories. But I mean, and we are just in an age of conspiracy theories. They've always been around, but never this prevalent. I mean, there are people on TikTok talking about how the snow in Texas was faked. It's not real snow, so I just don't know. I don't know where it's going to go. Are people going to come to their senses as more information comes out, or not? I mean, Biden will probably benefit, at least in the short run, from the improvement of the economy that's going to happen over the next few months as we start to pull out of this. And it looks like we are starting to pull out of this. Got a brand new vaccine that only takes one shot, not quite as effective, but probably effective enough to bring us closer to herd immunity, even with the variants around. It's actually possibly more effective than Pfizer or the other in Moderna in terms of these new variants, because it was tested in South Africa and Brazil as well as the United States. So things are going to get better economically, and the Republicans are going to have to come up with a narrative. They're going to have to say, well, Trump set all that in motion, or and that, but it's really hard to defeat an incumbent who is doing well economically. So and it weakens authoritarian movements, because a lot of people turn to authoritarianism, whether it's what fascism, Stalinism, or something lighter, backing strongmen, when they are experiencing economic trauma.
Right.
And if there's less economic trauma and people are doing well, it does not bode well for that moment and movement. And the Republicans will find themselves having to decide which way they want to go. But it seems like they're locking in into a very myopic short-term thinking. And, so I don't know what's going to happen by 2024. It's a long ways away. It's not that long, but it's a long ways away in terms of politics. There's so much that can happen between now and then. Other crises, we don't know how it's going to be affected. All I know is that this investigation is going to be releasing facts. The right-wing media is being sued hard by Dominion and Smartmatic. Pillow Guy just got sued, these they're going to have to actually defend him. Giuliani and Sidney Powell were literally running to avoid service, skipping states. I think they both got served, so you're going to have those developments. You're going to have the criminal investigation in New York, as well as Georgia. New York, of course, the Supreme Court refused to overturn the low court decision that allows Trump that forces Trump's people to cough up the taxes for the last 11 years. We won't get to see them, but they will be part of the grand jury investigation. That there's going to be all kinds of stuff that's implied in that if charges do get filed, and the rest. We've got all of these things that are going to be trickling over, percolating over the next few years. What are American voters going to do with it? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, good point. And just something else to put a fine point on what's going on in New York. The Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, who is the one who will be getting Trump's taxes. And from what I've read, it could happen fairly soon. Could be as much as 1 million pages. But the folks on his staff are going to know what they're looking for. So it's not going to take years to go through that. The other interesting thing, I think, and I'd be interested to hear your opinion on this. Recently, Cy Vance hired on a temporary basis another attorney who has a lot of experience in financial and corruption cases, Mark Pomerantz, who's been around for a long
specialist.
time. Yes, exactly. And this, I think, should send shivers to the Trump side, because this is a guy who knows how to investigate, put together, and prosecute these kinds of cases. So I think that was a good move on Cy Vance's part. I think it also indicates what he thinks he's going to find in those taxes.
Yeah, and it looks like, according to a headline today, I didn't get to read the article, but Don Jr. is a focus of this investigation. So we'll see. We'll see how it times well. I just, and we've got the investigation in Georgia. and God knows what else is going to pop up. Now that the DOJ and is not under the bar's hands. I mean, we also have the possibility that we're going to get an unredacted account of the Mueller report. So there's just a lot that's going to happen here. But will the information get to all the American people? Because we've got our separated media, and will they process it? I mean, there is human nature doesn't necessarily mean that you change your mind because you're presented with evidence that undermines your views. Our politics are kind of our identity. It's what group you're with. It's how you identify with that particularly. It's more cultural than political in the classic sense these days. Even when you're hurting, you can be led to, as the left likes to say, vote against your interests because you're going to vote culturally. You're going to vote, to the group that you identify with, and so I don't know what kind of impact it's going to have. We know that there are trickles away from what's happening. Will that be reversed? Will there be some other calamity that traumatizes people? Will Biden blow it? I don't know. Biden seems to be doing really well so far, very careful about things. I'm a little critical that he's not going as strong for the student forgiveness and all of that. I've got a lot of problems with him, but he is probably going to be the most progressive president we've seen in a long time, probably since the New Deal. And so how is that going to play out with all these investigations, with the facts coming out, with the economy improving, if it does, with a lot of jobs being created in sustainable energy and the investment in that? That's really got to be what the Democrats really do have to follow Bernie's advice in this and go bold, not be technocratic.
I was just going to say, in fact, I just made a note to myself, go big. Yeah, this is the time for the Biden administration to go big. And you're right. I think that's definitely going to be the advice from Bernie Sanders and others as well. But, one of the reasons why I think the Biden administration should go big right now, it's not just because they have, the 50 plus Kamala Harris for 51 in the Senate, although that makes it possible and reasonable and plausible. But the other reason has to do with something you just mentioned, and that's that politics now is an identity. And you mentioned the ingredients there. It's that we have siloed communications where people stay in their own place where they get the information that validates their preconceived notions. And there's really no way to get people to choose to leave those areas. The other thing is that given the nature of social media, you're spot on correct that politics has become part of our identity. The group we belong to now is part of our identity. And I don't think there's any information, there's no speech that Joe Biden could give that would cause people to all of a sudden abandon that identity and take on another identity quickly. This is not going to be something that will be fixed quickly. I'm not even sure anybody has any idea how it's going to be fixed. Yeah. So given that, as long as you've got the votes, go big, because you don't know how long you're going to have the votes.
Yeah, which brings us, we got a few minutes before we get to our predictions, but the coronavirus bill. It looks like it's going to be straight along party lines. There are going to be no crossovers on it. I think the Republicans are again miscalculating because this is very popular. I don't think, they really, it's a good idea for them to say, wait a minute, I got that 1,400 bringing the total to 2,000. You voted against it. Why? I don't think they really want to be in that position, but it looks like they're angling for that. And I think they're banking on Manchin or Sinema, the two more moderate Democrats, not coming forward with the, on either the college tuition forgiveness program, which again Biden has kind of wants to do 10,000 rather than 50,000, even though a lot of governors are saying please do the 50,000, it benefits the economy. But also the minimum wage going up to $15 gradually. And whether or not the minimum wage can even be included in the reconciliation process. It's supposed to, be only based on things that can have a big impact on the budget, and it can't be an incidental effect. And there's a lot of different criteria as to what that means. So we don't know. The parliamentarian is expected to rule sometime this week on that. They can override the parliamentarian, but then all of a sudden Manchin and Sienna are a bit more powerful on that. Before the show, you remarked that West Virginia is one of the poorest states in the country that could really benefit from that.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, I certainly understand the problem that it causes for small businesses as far as budgeting goes and so on, but it's not like the $15 an hour wage would take effect immediately. It's going to be gradually phased in. And a Democratic administration probably would come up with some sort of aid to make that easier for small business, because nobody wants to harm small business. That's where a lot of the jobs in this country are. But I don't understand Joe Manchin. I also find it hard to believe that there's not a single Republican who would look at $15 an hour and say, a lot of my constituents would benefit from that.
You would think. We are at the time of the show where we give our predictions, and so far I think we're both doing pretty well this year. But we'll see at as the year goes on. Chuck, what do you got?
Yeah, you're right. Nobody bats 1,000, but that's the goal. A couple of things. One, I think soon we're going to see, and after the COVID bill and all of that, certainly, but sometime soon, we're going to see a move in Congress, I think, to update and revamp, and I believe I have the number right, Form 278, which I believe is required by the Ethics in Government Act. That's the form that candidates have to fill out. That it gives people an idea about finances and so on, but it does not require taxes. I think there's going to be a move in Congress soon to require at least 5 or maybe even 10 years of taxes to be made public for people who are running for president. And I think that they'll use that form and a rework of that form to move that through. So that's one thing. The other thing is keep an eye on the city of Berkeley. Their city council has voted to move forward with some police reforms, not defunding the police, but for example, one thing that they're thinking about doing is no longer will police make traffic stops for minor things like a taillight is out or a rolling stop where there's nobody else around. The city's transportation department will take care of those kinds of things. And it's going to be a great experiment to see how police reform in the wake of everything that happened last year is going to be rolled out. So Berkeley might be an incubator for that.
All right, I've got a couple real quick ones. One is Tandem. I think she is not going to be the OMB budget director. With Manchin pulling out his support for her, that pretty much is it. I don't think she's going to get any Republicans. I believe Ann O'Leary will actually replace her as a nominee and have no problem rolling in.
That's a California connection.
Yes, and secondly, I believe that assuming that the parliamentarian approves the wage hike as as sufficiently related to the budget, and therefore it can be part of the reconciliation bill, I do believe that they will wear Manchin down. Probably offer some stuff, maybe even slowing it down. I do believe it will pass with that. I may be optimistic here, But there are plenty of economists, even in the chamber, who's been backing Biden, to the Republicans complaining about it, who understand that in the short term there might be layoffs, but in the long run, when you put more money in the hands of consumers, the businesses will benefit. The biggest issue is inflation. There's ways to deal with inflation that involve it, but those are my predictions. We will see.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Well, that concludes the show tonight. I want to thank you. You're either watching us on TV or listening to us on the radio, but we expect by next week to be discussing more of the issue. We'll get back and be talking about the FBI and the Pentagon response. I think it's not going to slow down. I think it's going to become more and more intense, and we'll have plenty to talk about.